Hello, I'm Cindy. Today I will show you how to draft a basic sleeve pattern. From this one pattern, you can create many different sleeve designs like puff sleeves, cap sleeves, and more. First, let's take all the measurements we need. First thing first, bicep circumference. To measure this, place your hand on your hip and measure around the fullest part of your upper arm. I'll put my own measurements here for reference. Next is sleeve length. For this, drop the tape measure from your shoulder point down to where you want your sleeve to end. After that, we'll measure the sleeve opening circumference. For this, measure around the area where the sleeve opening will be. If you want some ease here, simply loosen the tape measure until you reach your desired circumference. If you're drafting a longer sleeve like a wrist length sleeve, you should measure around your hand, not your wrist. The wrist circumference is usually smaller, and if you draft based on the wrist measurement, your hand may not be able to slide through the sleeve opening. Finally, we'll take the armhole measurement, and this comes from your pattern, not your body. You need the total armhole length from your body's pattern. That's the front armhole plus the back armhole, excluding seam allowances. Here I have my block patterns without seam allowances. I'm going to walk the tape measure along the armhole curve of the front first, and then pin that point on the tape and continue measuring along the back armhole. My total is 43 centimeters, so I write it down. If your pattern already includes seam allowances, simply redraw the actual stitching lines and measure along those lines. If you don't have your pattern anymore, which can happen sometimes, you can measure the armhole directly on your finished garment. Just remember to exclude the seam allowances like we did earlier. Now that we have all the measurements, let's draft the basic sleeve pattern. I'll first show you how to draft a basic sleeve pattern with no ease first, and then right after that, I'll show you how to add ease to the sleeve pattern for a more tailored look. I'll explain the difference between sleeves with ease and without ease later as well. Now let's get started. You'll need a piece of paper folded in half. If the top edge is clean and straight, you can use it as your baseline. If not, draw a line perpendicular to the folded edge. This will act as your baseline for drafting. First, from the baseline and along the folded edge, mark your sleeve length. Mine is 25 centimeters. From that point, draw a line perpendicular to the folded edge. To make sure this line is exactly at a 90-degree angle, I measure 25 from the baseline along the folded edge, mark another point, and connect the 2 points. This way, I know I have a perfectly straight perpendicular line. On this line, we'll locate the sleeve opening. Since we're working on folded paper, take the sleeve opening circumference divided by 2, mark that point, and leave it there for later. Next, we determine the bicep width along the baseline. To do this, take your bicep circumference, divide it by 2, and then add ease. I usually add 2 centimeters of ease here. This amount isn't fixed. You can add 1, 2, 2.5, or even 3 centimeters, depending on how stretchy your fabric is and how much comfort you want around the bicep. I usually add 2 centimeters, which means the total ease around the bicep becomes 4 centimeters since we're drafting only half of the sleeve. From my experience, adding 2 centimeters works well even for woven non-stretch fabrics. It's gonna create a fitted sleeve like this, not too tight, but if you want more room, feel free to experiment with 2.5 or 3 centimeters and see what feels best for you. So for my measurements, 28 divided by 2 plus 2 equals 16 centimeters. On the baseline, mark that point and draw a short line perpendicular to the baseline. It doesn't need to be very long. Next, we're going to draft the sleeve cap line. Take the total armhole measurement, front plus back, divide it by 2, then subtract 1.5 centimeter. You might be wondering why we're subtracting 1.5 centimeter. I'll explain that in just a moment. Let's just keep going for now. For me, that's 43 divided by 2 minus 1.5, which equals 20 centimeters. Now place one end of your ruler at this corner here and follow the line we just drew until you reach the measurement you calculated, and then draw a slanted line. Divide the slanted line into 3 equal sections. Then divide the first section in half. Lower the midpoint of that first section by ½ centimeter. And then raise this point by 2.5 centimeters. Now connect these points to form the sleeve cap curve. Try to keep the top of the sleeve smooth and not too pointy. You can lightly sketch it with a pencil first. Now let's go back to the question. Why subtract 1.5 centimeter when we calculate the length of the slanted line here? When you sew a sleeve, you're sewing the sleeve cap curve to the armhole, which is the combined curve of the front and back bodice. So ideally, the lengths of these curves need to match. The tricky part is that it's very hard to draw a sleeve cap curve that lands on an exact measurement. So instead of trying to control the curve directly, we first draw a straight guideline, which is this slanted line here. Now, when we later draw the sleeve cap curve based on this line, the curve will always end up longer than the straight line itself. Because of that, when we draw this slanted line, we subtract about 1.5 centimeter. This number roughly accounts for the extra length created when the straight line is turned into a curve. Doing this helps the final sleeve cap curve match the total armhole length much more accurately. Finally, connect the sleeve cap down to the sleeve opening and your basic sleeve is done. Then you cut the sleeve out. There's one last important step. For sleeves, we need to distinguish between the front and back of the sleeves. This is because the front and back armholes are shaped differently, and the sleeve cap needs to match those differences so the sleeve hangs correctly and allows movement. To show this on the pattern, offset the two underarm edges by 1 centimeter. Press the paper flat. Then draw a new curve along this curved edge. Then cut this section off. The side that gets cut away is the front sleeve, and the remaining side is the back sleeve. When sewing, make sure to match the front and back of the sleeve to the corresponding front and back bodice pieces. Now let's move on to the sleeve pattern with ease. First, what is ease and why we need ease in sleeve pattern? If you notice, your arm doesn't just hang straight down, it moves forward, backward, and upward. The armhole on the bodice is a fixed shape, but the sleeve needs a bit of extra length at the top to allow for a variety of movements. That length that we add at the top is called sleeve cap ease. When you sew the sleeve, this extra length is gently eased into the armhole, mostly around the top of the shoulder. It creates a smooth, rounded shape over the shoulder and gives your arm room to move. Without ease, the sleeve can look flat or collapsed instead of nicely rounded, and the sleeve can feel a bit tight when you lift or move your arm. That said, sleeves without ease are still commonly used in certain cases, especially for knit or stretchy fabrics, or relaxed or loose silhouettes or drop shoulder designs. Now that you know why we add ease to sleeves, let's draft one. Basically, we're gonna draft the same basic pattern we did earlier and stop at the step when we get a balanced sleeve, meaning without the part where we distinguish the front and back sleeves. Now we're gonna add ease. To do this, we're gonna raise the sleeve cap up by 1 to 3 centimeters. Let's say I'm sewing a workwear shirt. I'm gonna raise the top by 2 centimeters. Most sleeve cap ease is concentrated in the upper third of the sleeve, which is indicated by this point. So I'm gonna redraw the sleeve cap curve from this point and cut out the sleeve. Next, we're gonna make some notches on the sleeve so when we sew we know where the ease is supposed to be. I'm making notches at the 1/3 mark on both sides of the sleeve. Then we offsetting the underarm seams by 1 centimeter, pressing the paper flat, tracing and cutting the curve. The cut side is the front, the other side is the back. I'm gonna add one more notch for the back to easily tell them apart. This is also the standard in commercial patterns. 1 notch for the front and 2 notches for the back. You want to mark these notches on the bodice as well. Measure from the underarm point to the front and back sleeve notches. Then transfer those measurements onto the armhole curves of the bodice. That's it. That's how you draft a basic sleeve pattern with and without ease. If you want to learn how to sew sleeves, I've linked a tutorial below if you want to check it out. Happy sewing and see you next time.